And right now, we want to take a live look at what's going on in Washington. A momentous day there, clear skies. That is a beautiful shot of the Lincoln Memorial, where thousands have been gathering this morning in honor of what took place 50 years ago next Wednesday. Today, they're also celebrating the March on Washington. Let's talk about that. Democratic Congressman John Lewis of Georgia was a close friend of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He stood with Reverend King, in fact, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial 50 years ago during that historic March on Washington. Lewis, a college student then, was one of the speakers. He says King's speech and the march changed history. Some reflections now from Congressman Lewis.
We have made some progress. We've come a distance, but we still have a distance to go. We still have roads to travel. It was a march for jobs and freedom. There's hundreds and thousands and millions of our brothers and sisters without jobs 50 years later.
250,000 people participated in the March on Washington on August 28, 1963, for jobs and freedom. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered a speech that helped to change race relations in America. King's leadership in the nonviolent struggle for civil rights earned him the distinction of being called a drum major for peace and a drum major for justice. But to his children, he was simply known as Daddy. In today's Beyond the Dream, an interview with Reverend King's youngest child, Bernice. The Willard Intercontinental Hotel in D.C. is where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. put the finishing touches on his famous I Have a Dream speech. It's where I sat down with King's daughter, Bernice, to discuss her reflections of her father's legacy.
One of the things that my father was really trying to say to us, not just 50 years ago, but 50 years ago, 49, 48, 47, all the way to 45 when he was assassinated, he was really speaking to us about our humanity and understanding our interconnectedness and interrelatedness. That's why he talked about sitting down at a table of brotherhood. In other words, us understanding that we are one huge human family. That's why he talked about not judging by the color of the skin, but by the content of the character.
What can you do in order to spur that kind of thinking again, to have people refocus on the moral clarity and the courageous leadership and the unselfish service that your father championed?
You think about what happened in Newtown, Connecticut. I mean, that should have jolted us like nothing else. 6-year-olds losing their life so senselessly. Thinking about Chicago, as we've talked about, and all those little boys and kids, young people, killing each other. What has happened to a society that can turn away from that kind of situation and not realize this speaks to who we are as a nation and a cancer in our society? The situation with Trayvon Martin, you know, there's several Trayvon Martins every day, not just in the black community, Latino, Hispanic community, and other communities.
He also talked about extremism. He said you have a choice of being an extremist of hate, and he chosen it being an extremist of love.
One of the most, I think, important traits in unconditional love is the capacity to forgive. It's very easy to become bitter. It's very easy to become angry. It's very easy to want to take revenge. It's a capacity to have a mentality that says, by destroying them, a part of me is being destroyed because they're part of my humanity. My dad lost his life, but look what the world has gained. Even though, you know, he didn't make it to see that promised land he talked about. And everybody hadn't made it to this promised land he talked about. But there are people that are benefiting from the life and ultimately the sacrifice that he made.
Bernice King with some reflections of her father, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who once said, "I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear." You can see more of my interview with Bernice King in our special Beyond the Dream, How Far Have We Come? Today at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Fox News Channel.